Oh boy, God is good. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. Thankful for our worship team. Thankful for the amazing breakfast. Thank you for all of you that have stepped up this year, this morning, in all sorts of ways. Good stuff. Wow. Okay.
And those that are showing up.
And those.
Some churches canceled.
What?
Some churches canceled Christmas.
Some churches canceled Christmas. He's here. Yeah, that's true. That's true. We are glad that you are with us today, whether you are here via Zoom or in person. We are stoked. I'm excited to talk a little bit with you today. I've been trying to think about a good way to start, and I'm not even sure that I know one. Oh, I'm going to go get my coffee, though. I left it here because I think that's my coffee. It's hot, man. This coffee will make a dragon want to retire.
10. Well, minus me and...
Not enough young people in here. Too hot? Make a dragon want to retire, man. No? All right.
That's 3.
Okay. All right. I thought that was going to fly. All right. Note to self, don't make up jokes in a moment. All right, so Christmas is behind us, sort of. Kind of, a little bit. We're all kind of dealing with the ramifications of Christmas time. And Christmas is, you guys know this about us, but I'll just tell you that for us, Christmas is a little bit weird because my wife got ripped off in the birthday lottery, right? Like her birthday's right up next to Christmas. Some of you know exactly how that is. If Larry were here, he could tell us. Patty has a close to Christmas birthday. And this year we kind of did our traditional thing. Traditionally, we eat a great big vat of amazing, delicious ham. And this year we ate a great big vat of ham. It wasn't Larry's special smoked ham, though, so we did miss that. But the ham we got was pretty good. And everything else we did around Christmas was loads of fun. We did what we tend to do because my wife has a Christmas birthday. We tend to go out on the 23rd and buy her a nice meal, and then we all hang out on the 24th and do fun, crazy stuff, and then Christmas is Christmas, and we try to do that this year. We went to Applebee's on the 23rd, and it was delicious. I had a great big burger, bacon, fantastic. It went wonderful with my eating disorder. Yeah. So we went to Applebee's, and as we're eating, I'm thinking about how weird it is, how different things are now, right? Now, my kids have all grown up. I've got one that has 2 babies of her own in her belly, and I was thinking about the previous years, and I was reminded of one year specifically. She may or may not remember this, but there was a year where we took my wife out for her birthday dinner, and my daughter Lillian got a slab of ribs, right? We tend to eat well around the holidays, mostly because you guys are so generous with gift cards. Thank you very much. This year, Ruth, thank you so much. That was an amazing Applebee's meal. I don't remember who bought the gift card this year, but it was enough that we got ribs for my daughter, right? So my daughter, at the time she was young, I don't remember exactly what year it was, but she was probably 13 or 14, just beginning to be like a rebellious teenager. And she wanted to take her ribs home, so we boxed them up and we took them home. And at some point during the next day, I don't know if someone had given her a Christmas present or if it was a stocking thing, I can't quite remember. But she got a king-size Kit Kat bar. And I really like ribs and Kit Kats. So in a weak moment, without her knowledge, I ate her leftover ribs. Yeah, and then I ate 2 sticks of the king-size 4-stick Kit Kat. Yeah, it didn't go over well. But the thing is I was hungry. And I have a great capacity to be selfish. I went over there and I picked the very best piece out of the untapped pan. Tony over here is like, yeah, I noticed that was the good piece. And I'm like, yeah, that one's mine. My piece. I get the good stuff. I get the ribs. I get the Kit Kats, right? I get the fancy cheese. And I'm thinking about how ugly and weird and crazy that is. And I think it really boils down to sort of a king-size choice, not because it was a king-size Kit Kat, but because there's something about Christmas that I think is easier to see the day after, but there's something about Christmas that reminds me of the challenges of being kingly or having kingly type choices. I told you last week that I'm not reading through the traditional Christmas story this year, and I am going to touch on a little bit of it today, so I didn't intentionally lie to you, but I'm going to leave a whole lot out. I'm going to paraphrase a whole lot, so as usual, don't trust me, go check it out for yourself, dig into the Word of God, and see if the things that I say today align themselves with the truth that you find there. We should probably do a little review, a little Christmas review. Joseph and Mary do the journey, right? The journey that we're all familiar with, the journey that's in all the Christmas specials and all the stuff, and they make this journey to Bethlehem that we said last week means house of bread, right? The house of bread is going to give birth to the bread of life, who also happens to be the King of Kings, right? And just after that time, scripturally, after that time, we see that there are these cats in the East that get this message, right? Come and worship the one born King of the Jews. And you can go read that story. We talked about it's my soapbox Christmas business is the star in the sky for the wise man. I've spoken on it a million times. I'd love to speak with you in detail on it. Either come and talk to me or sign up for one of the Vision logo courses. It's in that stuff. It ties into the vision of all that we do around here, because we do believe that God meets people right where they're at with right what they need. And the weird astrologist in the East didn't need a Romans road track. They needed a star. Right, so God gives them this star, and we'll leave that, and you can read about that on your own. But then they begin this journey. And many of us still today, many people think that they were kings, whether they were or not as far as their positions go back home, we don't know scripturally. But there are traditions that tell us that these people that were coming were kings. We don't even know that there were three of them, right? But we know the song, We Three Kings, right? So, right? Yeah, there you go. So we know the song, and we know that we have this tradition that these fellas, whether there were 3 or 300, we know there were 3 gifts, right? And we know from those gifts that these guys made great sacrifices. It wasn't easy to provide and bring the gifts that they gave Jesus around that first Christmas time. And we know the story, we know that they worship him and all of that, but it's not where it starts. The story begins when these guys arrive in Jerusalem. And everybody is shocked by their arrival. Perhaps because they're kings, or perhaps just because they're so set apart. They're so different. They seem to have so much authority and wealth and capability that for most common folks in that day, you would look at these folks and be like, they must be kings. They're the ones that don't have shit all over them.
And they didn't eat the
I made that up. That's a Monty Python line. Scratch that. I don't think the Spirit said that. I said that.
They didn't eat the Kit Kat or the ribs.
They didn't eat the Kit Kat or the ribs. You're absolutely right. They show up in Jerusalem, though, and they tell the story that you've all heard before. They tell the story, hey, we've come to worship the one born King of the Jews. The trouble is, there's another cat in Jerusalem that happens to be King of the Jews. And it's not news that he wants to hear, right? His name was Herod, and you can read all about him in the scriptures, and you can read all about him in history, and you will find that he was a ruthless king. This guy did more than like steal his kids' Kit Kats, right? When they were a threat to his throne, he just smoked them, right? He just offed them. He had a bunch of them. So he could do that. He could get away with it. I wonder how many I have to have, because I got 4. But Herod was all about being the king and having the power. So he gets this news from the wise men that there's a king born of the Jews. And he goes full on selfish, Kit Kat stealing, rib eating, baby assaulting, kind of crazy in these moments. The wise men, they have their moment with Mary and baby Jesus. And then we get a glimpse of the Christmas Joseph. And I didn't put his story in, but in years past, we've talked a lot about the Christmas Joseph and how kind of impressive it is that this person, this man of God, is able to play such a huge, powerful role in the story of Christmas without ever uttering a single word. I mean, maybe in your Christmas specials, you see Joseph, husband of Mary, say something in the scriptures. He never speaks. He's just weirdly obedient, right? But it's not an easy thing for him, because you know the Christmas story. Joseph finds out that Mary's pregnant, and he's like, I don't know, right? I'm going to divorce her quietly because I'm a decent guy and I don't want to ruin her reputation. I'm going to just get rid of this woman, though, because she didn't get pregnant by me. And then Joseph has a dream where an angel visits him and says, no, it's cool, man. Marry her. That's paraphrased. I mean, I don't think the angel said it's cool, man, but maybe. Right? Regardless, Joseph obeys and does the whole story that we know, goes to Bethlehem. We have the kingly moment where the sometimes supposed kings come from the east, and you have the aggressive king there in Jerusalem. Meanwhile, over in Bethlehem nearby, you have the actual King of Kings being born, and the wise men visit him and worship him and make their way home. I guess I should really emphasize, it's not just that the wise men don't steal ribs or Kit Kats, it's that it would have taken like 10 lifetimes of the common person in those days saving up to make the journey that they made. They invested deeply and heavily, and then sacrificed when they arrived, and then went home. And whoa, I wish I knew the rest of their story. But I don't, because the camera lens stays with the Christmas couple. And it turns out that Joseph isn't finished dreaming. And that's where we're going to pick up our first scripture for today. Matthew chapter 2, if you're following along. Oh, by the way, side point, maybe I shouldn't do this now, but I already started. It won't be long. For those of you that have been like, hey, it's driving me crazy that I don't get a bulletin, that I don't get the scriptures, that I want to tuck into my Bibles and that sort of thing. Very soon, maybe as early as the new year, we will start providing bulletins again. We're not going to pass them out, but we'll have them here. If you would like to take a bulletin, you can take one. We just kind of put that on pause back when we didn't really know anything about COVID or how it was transferred and that sort of thing. So the bulletins will be back soon. For now, if you don't have a bulletin, you can follow along on your phone, on the screen. You can, or after the service, we will gladly put a Bible in your hands, no strings attached. Matthew chapter 2, verses 13 through 14. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. Okay, let's pause there for a second. You may or may not already know this, but I think that almost everybody agrees that this is true, so I'll state it in a dogmatic way. The Gospel of Matthew is intentionally focused on the Jewish people, more so than the other Gospels. Not that the other ones aren't, just that Matthew's writing, more than any of the other Gospels, ties almost everything he says to some Old Testament story, to something that the people were already aware of. Matthew had a great sense of his Hebraic traditions and culture. Merry Christmas. And he just does it in too many places for me to point them all out, right? He's always quoting the prophets. He's always using little allusions to stories that they would have all known, but with time and lack of use, we have sometimes forgotten. In fact, Matthew even does another thing that it works in this context, but sometimes causes some trouble. Sometimes Matthew assumes that his audience is already aware of the ingrained Jewish stories. Whereas John will say something like, well, they were at the Passover, which they did like this because of this. Matthew will just assume that his listeners already know that because they're likely Jewish. Okay. I didn't mean to give you a great big deep kind of history thing. I want to start there because I think no matter who you are, when you read this part of the Christmas story in that day, you don't think about the Christmas story that we think about. It has either just happened or hasn't even really happened, right? But it is pretty interesting when you start to read this story, maybe for the first time as a Jewish person, right? You start to read this story and you see something weird in this Christmas story. You see a very clear and obvious tie back to their biggest, most important story, right? Their most important story, scripturally, is the Exodus story, right? That's why they continually celebrate Passover. I'm not saying it's the only one. I'm just saying, overall, everybody who was anybody, if you were a Jewish person, if you were a Hebraic person, if you lived anywhere in the area, you were familiar with the story of the Exodus. It was the story of God's great rescue, right? Phenomenal, amazing story. Go and read it. It's loaded with dark and light and frogs and all kinds of stuff. Right? And so when Matthew says, Joseph had a dream and was told to go to Egypt, doesn't that tie? I mean, if you have some recollection, maybe don't, but let me just tell you how it is. The story in Genesis goes that Joseph, not Christmas Joseph, right, but Genesis Joseph, has a dream, and it ends up with him in Egypt. And there's a lot there. That is not a fair paraphrase, okay? So go and look at all of that, because there's lots of ups and lots of downs during that time. But ultimately, what you find is, as Genesis transfers into Exodus, you get the story of two kings. They use the word Pharaoh, but in Egypt, the Pharaoh was the king, right? So Joseph shows up in Egypt, and through a series of events, he finds favor in the eyes of the king of Egypt. And it looks to me as if that king is just overly sacrificial. He's given Joseph more responsibility, more jobs. He's doing everything that he can. And what happens? It ends up providing protection and rescue for Joseph's family. Because Joseph's family was back in the same spot that Jesus is in our other story, right? And things got rough. Joseph left, and then later, years later, after things got rough for the family, they all come to Egypt. And because of Joseph's good relationship with the king in Egypt, the whole family is rescued and saved. They get to eat. They get their own land in Egypt. We've heard of the land of Goshen, right? And then at the end of Genesis, the story transitions. And you go into this dark story with a dark king, a new Pharaoh who has forgotten the family of Joseph. And all of a sudden, this king does what most kings do, what we saw Herod do. And this king decides he has to protect what's his. He has to show everybody who the boss is. He has to be in control and in charge. And these people have stopped just being a family, and now they've grown in great numbers. And they're a threat to my power. They're a threat to my control. I have a plan. I'll kill the baby boys. Go read Exodus. That's what happens. Okay, now with that in your head, and listen, this is a story that's in every single original readers' heads. This is a story that they know better than you know, Pilgrims and Native Americans, right? This is a story that you know more than Rosa Parks on a bus or Abraham Lincoln in the Civil War. This story of the Exodus and the rescue of God and bringing his people out of Egypt is all already in their heads. And they don't have context for Christmas yet. It's brand new, right? So that's the context they have. So when Matthew says saying things like, wow, there's a new Joseph. He's also a dreamer. And he's going to Egypt. That's Christmas. Right? It's tied together. And if you have all that context, you just can't miss it. Okay, now hold on to that. Let's do this. Woo! I'm way off my notes. All right. Well, let's do the next portion of our main story today, Matthew chapter 2, verses 16 through 18. So the wise men have gone home. Joe and Mary Joe got this message, this dream from an angel, and he goes unto Egypt, and it comes time for God to repeat the history of calling his chosen one out of Egypt. And we see this. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. You see him doing that Jewish thing. He's quoting prophets. A voice heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. That's Jeremiah. Jeremiah 31:15. Do you see it? And do you see that what the king in Egypt did is exactly what the king around Christmas time is trying to do? Or presumably, in fact, then does. Right? But then what happens is that guy dies. Right? So Joseph gets a new message. It's time to come back. Right? So in verse 19, we have this. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were trying to take the child's life are dead. So he got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and he lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. It seems to me that in a whole lot of ways that I tend to miss before Christmas, after Christmas, I see that Christmas is a real story about the choices of kings. A story that reminds them of the choices that the kings in Egypt had made. A story that reminds them of the choices that the wise men had made. A story that reminds them of the choices that the king who insisted on clinging to his own power, Herod, had made. And then they have this Doudah Day where they come out. They come out of Egypt. But there's still danger all over the place. They get to come home, sort of, resettle back in Israel, not Jerusalem. Oh, no, they don't go to the heart of the religious area. Not even Bethlehem, that's probably a little too close to the heat too. So they go to Nazareth. Nazareth, which is so lowly that until, I don't know, 40 or 50 years ago, people insisted that it never even existed, right? Nazareth just really wasn't renowned for anything. Even in our Gospels, we've got one apostle being like, what? Did anything good come out of Nazareth, right? But that's where the King of Kings goes. The King of Kings and the people who carry him seem to make choices that allow for the weirdness of other kings. And that's the hardest thing in the whole world. For me, that's the very hardest part of following this king, is the idea like, what? What? These folks, in one way or another, this person, that king, this situation has done me wrong. And I want to show my capacity to be king here, to be in control, to be in charge. I got to let somebody know that they can't do me like that. And you can maintain that for a while. But if that attitude lives in you, and I'm speaking directly from experience, if that attitude lives in you, it will only bring dark. It will only bring pain. It'll only make you step and fetch and try to cling and grasp and hold on to control. But here we get a different picture. The wise men don't come and take. They come and give. They come and they sacrifice. And the people of God that are in charge of literally hauling the King of Kings around, they don't have this attitude that's like, screw all you people, we talked to Gabriel. Right? But don't many of the kings today have that attitude? This story of Christmas is a story about choices. And the problem with humanity that has always, well, nearly always existed. The problem that we so want to be king, that we will take it. We will take it even when we freaking know absolutely better. And it becomes a difficult thing because God leaves room for that. And that's hard. And the only story that I have that reminds me of that and the weirdness. Wow, what was that? Has it? Maybe my battery's dying. Oh well, it's still green. We're going to try to go.
Yeah.
So the story that I think of when I think of that is a 10-year-old Dan that was pretty sure he was the king. And he what he really wanted more than anything at that time was to be the king on the baseball field. And I had a buddy that was better than me at baseball, and it pissed me off. But his dad was kind of like an assistant coach of the team, and I really looked up to him. And now listen, this is like 40 years ago. So this is before, we were just figuring out that cigarettes were going to kill you, right? The warning labels were not on smokeless tobacco yet.
Oh.
But my buddy's dad, who was kind of a hero of mine, would chew this, it's not even, it's like the purest, most disgusting tobacco you can imagine. He did chew beech nut, but it wasn't beech nut.
Oh.
I'm going to take you up a level.
Oh.
Most people, you can find beech nut at the grocery store.
Yep.
In the bag, that's beech nut. Well, this also came in a bag, but it wasn't a bag. And I've told the story of this tobacco before, but not this part of the story. The bag was just a piece of cellophane pulled over a full twisted, soaked tobacco leaf. And it was twisted so tight that it was like a plug. And you had to just, like a real baseball player. Right? And this guy, and again, I'm not knocking this guy. It was a different culture in a different world. But this guy has the wisdom to say, boys, it's just better if you don't. Just leave it alone. Just stay away from that. But he didn't lock it in a cabinet. Right? So we got in there. Oh, and it made us disgustingly sick. And I'll spare you the details of that. But you can imagine. Ugly. You can look it up. I think a year or two ago I was talking to somebody about it, and it apparently still exists. Don't buy me one. It's called a Mammoth Cave Twist. Mammoth Cave Twist. I think they made it in Kentucky. And, it was just every bit as disgusting as it sounds. And yet it began a several decade long love of smokeless tobacco in my mind and my heart, that oddly enough, as God has taken lots of other temptations away from me, he hasn't taken that one. I want it every single moment. Every single moment. It takes everything I have to walk past that aisle in the grocery store. That thorn is still in my side. And it's like, I get all of that, but I shouldn't have gone in that direction. I'm not whining about my own struggles. I am, I shouldn't be. But that's not my job here. If I could just remember that, we'd do so much better. If I just decided to not come and complain about my week to all of you, we'd be doing so much better. But on a lot of days, I want to be in charge. On a lot of days, I want to be the king. And on that day, because I made that choice, and because my buddy's dad, really gave me the freedom to make that choice, I chose poorly, and then I suffered, right? And others suffered. And, all right, I won't tell us ways that others suffered. The point is this. Isn't that always how it's been? And isn't that part of what kind of frustrates us with God, right? God is like, look, I love you. This is all yours. Just, do my will. But you can do whatever you want. In fact, I'll even show you the tobacco. Right over there by that tree. I'm not knocking chewing tobacco. I hope you don't hear me. And I'm not knocking smoke. I'm not talking about tobacco. I hope you understand that. Right? What I'm talking about is that desire in each of us to be in charge, to be the one that decides, be the one that says, nope, that's my Kit Kat. And when we do that, what happens? The next generation suffers and fails to see the kingdom the way they could or the way they should. And that's just how it is. Of course, we suffer too. We suffer the results of our own sin. We know how bad it is. We don't need anybody to tell us what, horrible jackasses we are. We kind of get that. Or at least, maybe you guys don't have that. I got that, man. I go to bed every night feeling like a hypocrite. And I lose sleep over it. It's just terrible. Right? So, wait a minute, I just said I wasn't going to do that. Here's what it is. I'm still there. I'm still in that spot. And Christmas is about a whole lot of things, friends. Christmas is about joy and hope and anticipation and salvation and sacrifice and all of the stuff that Christmas is about. It's just beautiful. But if we leave off this kind of little bit that's reflecting the ugly that's been throughout all of history, we are going to find ourselves in trouble, and we're going to decide that one way or another, we are the kings, and then worse, we're going to try to align ourselves with the King of Kings in our mind, but in reality, we're going to walk it out like a selfish, aggressive, nasty jerk of a king like Herod. And we'll get on the news and tell everybody how stupid and horrible they are, how wrong they are not to follow our king. When do we do the kinds of strategic withdrawals that reflect the actual kingdom and love of God? Why do we fight so hard against that when we see it so often in Scripture? It was just 2 or 3 weeks ago that we looked at like 3 different strategic withdrawals that Jesus did. And now here we see that the very family of God that has every right to march into Jerusalem and say, King of Kings, come closer. This little baby might act like that Yoda TV show and just float you or melt you or whatever. Because we're the ones with the rights here. And I hear that everywhere today amongst those who claim to follow the king. But I don't see enough today, those of us going, oh, yeah, I could do that. I could take that. That could be mine. But I won't. I won't. I want to. Well, I want to. But I won't. Because I don't have to be the king. And that, friends, is not a one-time drop on your knees at an altar choice. It's an every single day. Decide how you're going to treat people online, in person, close to you, kids, parents, whatever. Every single moment I am faced, and I think if we're honest, we are all faced with the terrifying reality that we are expected to choose this day who we will serve. And that's glorious when it's glorious. It's glorious when I fall asleep at night and wake up and think, oh, thank you. That was such a blessing. I can't even remember the last 3 hours. And it wasn't chemically induced. Every time I bow before Jesus, I know that the Spirit of God can fill me up. I know that I can be made whole. I know that shalom is a thing, right? I get that. I know it's real. And there is nobody anywhere that will ever in all of my life convince me that I am not in a direct relationship with the King of Kings. That said, sometimes he threatens my power. Sometimes he messes with what I want. And I have to decide. It's not enough. It's not enough for me or you or anyone else to just be like, oh gosh, I sure am glad that you love me because I'm still a complete idiot. But what I really mean is, I still want to be king. I still want to be in charge, and I don't want to be, the king that gives people land and doesn't bitch about it. I don't want to be the king that provides for entire families or the king that sacrifices everything to make this long journey. I want to be the king that has the freaking Kit Kats. For all sorts of reasons. Mostly because, or at least partly because, all those other kings, the kings that are actually living like kings in the story, don't get the title of king. I like that title. I mean, I don't want you to think I like it. That's not spiritual. Right? Right? I mean, what if we just stop lying to ourselves and said, you know what? Every day is a temptation. Every day, because what we said last week is true, because Christmas actually splits the darkness. The darkness doesn't disappear. I know right where it's at. I can pop in and out whenever I like. And oddly enough, strangely enough, when I pop into the dark and I pop back, I find that I'm still loved. Which gives me a perfect excuse to revisit the dark. Oh, well, he still loves me this time. Right? Christmas says that doesn't have to be how we live. And I'm not pretending like it's an easy thing. I'm not going to make hey, it's a one-time choice and, woo-hoo and doo-dah. It's not a one-time choice. It's in every single moment, in the face of the dark, in the face of the temptation, while other kings are running their show, and you want that, or at least you think you do, and it's about in the midst of all of that, not just bowing and worshiping the King of Kings the way that most of us here today would claim that we do, or at least want to do, but it's about, and this is the harder part, it's about carrying him. Almost every single year, I find a way to tell you that you're Christmas. It's the way I end my Christmas messages. This year, I want you to remember that. You are Christmas. But I want to even take that a step further and say, like, I don't mean that you're Christmas on December 25th. Right? Today's the 26th. You're Christmas in the way that the wise men are Christmas, in the way that Mary and Joseph are Christmas, in the way that, yes, you're called to carry your king onto the world, but not as a selfish, aggressive, control-grabbing king that is really loving people with hooks on it and trying to pull back what is his or hers. Christmas can really change all of that. It's not just God saying that I'm with you on this one special day where you sing. Emmanuel means he is with us all the time. All the time. So I have a choice. And it's not as simple as a choice between good and bad, or whether or not I'm in God's will, or what. I guess we throw around so many different terms, but I think that really, when it really comes down to it, is in this moment, am I the king? Or is it Jesus? And I don't know how you deal with that. I know he wants to help you. I know he has helped me in the past. I also know that I've tried the one-time fix. I've had the, what? Oh my goodness, thank you so much. You did all of this for me. I'm so blessed. It's a new day. And we're going to talk more about that next week, right? And I love that feeling. I'm not knocking that feeling. What I'm saying is, 3 or 4, like for me, to this afternoon, the Christmas tree's coming down. By the time we hit January 3rd, I'm going to have forgotten all about the elves and the reindeer and the songs and the doodah and the glitter and the Shazam, or I don't know if Shazam's a Christmas thing, but all that's going to be gone, and I'm going to still be dealing with kingly choices. The good news of Christmas is not just that you're forgiven, not just that Jesus offers gifts, but it's that you, I mean you, I'm not, if you're out there and you're thinking, yeah, he's talking to those people that haven't given their lives to Jesus, then you haven't been listening. Right? I'm talking to each and every one of us, regardless of how long we have been following Jesus. Perhaps this after Christmas, the question should be, are we following with him as king or with us? Let's talk to him. God, you are good. Your word is amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for giving us the freedom to take a little detour this year and kind of focus on the lesser spots of the Christmas story. But I pray that all of us, that each of us would be or I don't know the word I'm looking for, Lord, but I pray that each of us would have a compulsion to actually spend time in the Christmas story this year, to really think about it from angles outside of ourselves, to really put it in the context that it exists in the scriptures, Lord, and then help us, Lord, as we how we doing? All right.
No.
Maybe just to a seat.
Now? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. Straight, there's a chair straight behind you.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but we're going to say, God, please be with Rick in these moments. Be with each of us as we wrap things up today. We may be skipping our last worship song, Lord, but you know that we love you. I'm not sure what the future holds exactly today, but I pray that you would help each of us to be sacrificial and walk in your way. In Jesus' name, amen. I don't have my phone. It's upstairs.
Who's got it?
on it.
They're on there.